Hello, everybody. I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And I would like to say that Exine is proud to have you together with us for this webinar regarding to the Agile Scrum program. Today, the subject will be inconsistent processes and cultural clashes, addressing the major barriers to Agile adoption. Today we'll be with Johann Botha, one of the SMEs that we currently use for many of our Agile activities, and also a close friend of ours and also mine that I'm really proud of. And today I will be your host for this session. My name is Ademar Albertin. I'm product owner from Exine, and I'll be guiding this session. I would like to ask you to guarantee that you are on mute to guarantee the consistency of the session. And of course, if you have any question, please feel free to drop your question by using the questions tab that is located on the right side of your screen on the GoToWebinar control panel. In case you cannot find a question, please use the chat tab over there available that I'll be monitoring along the session, both of the tabs. Okay. In the end of the session, all your questions will be addressed. So during the session, I'll be addressing many questions to Johann Botha, but then your questions, the audience questions, I'll be addressing in the end of the session. So please bear with us, be welcome, and enjoy the session. But before we start, of course, I would like to introduce Johann. Johann, the floor is yours. Introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, everyone. I've been in the industry for a very, very long time. Started with Agile concepts when I managed a development team in the 90s, so it's a long road. Absolutely love it. I'm in love with Agile concepts and Lean, and we use it quite a lot in our day-to-day coaching and consulting work that we do. Any questions? Go for it. I'll try and answer those, and if there are some questions that I can't answer, I'll get back to you.
Thank you very much, Johann. So, as we have many questions I would like to discuss with you regarding to the barriers of the adoption of Agile. So, let's start off. So, Johann, I would like to check, based on your experience, the following first question. Basically, the Agile, as we know already, has grown massively, not only in the software development, but in other industries. We are seeing many times like a marketing, finance, and other departments using even more Agile. The reporting that was there recently, that is called the State of Agile, cites inconsistency in process, cultural clashes, and general resistance to change by organizations as reasons for non-adoption. How can these three challenges be addressed at organizations? Could you please share your experience with us?
Okay, cool. So I think the first thing that I just want to mention, I assume that if you're on the call, that you genuinely wanted a straight answer. So I'm not going to mince words today. My goal is not to win friends and influence people, but rather to help you to get some insight in actually correcting some of the things that organizations are doing incorrectly. And this is based on our experience and obviously on the theory also. So I think with the three issues that's in the question, let me start with the last one. And I think to a large extent, this issue of resistance to change is a little bit of a myth. You know, people reject change because it's not in their interest to change. And I think people resist change not because, you know, for the sake of resisting it, but because there are some barriers that's in the way. And if we remove those barriers, it's much easier for people to go along with the change. Another thing that we found lately is that newer generations in the workplace find it far more easy to also to keep on changing and to be open to change within the workplace. And I think to some extent, even Generation Xers are far more accommodating of change than what we give them credit for, provided that the stumbling blocks are removed. Culture is an issue in many organizations, but leadership can quite easily solve this issue if they're really committed to becoming an agile organization. I think the bigger problem in terms of culture in organizations is that lately it's become cool to say that we're an agile organization. And many organizations, the leadership in many organizations say these things without actually understanding what it is to be agile. And what's even worse that we find in some organizations, they're not even too willing to listen and to change their way of thinking. I think this will become less of a issue in organizations as younger people start climbing the corporate ladder. And the first part of the question was about processes, but I saw that there's a lot of questions coming in about the way that we do things. So let's call them processes, if you will. So maybe it's best if we address those issues as we address some of the other questions. And at the end of the session, if there are some elements that is still missing, let's do that. So let's go on to the next question, I think, Adam.
Of course. Our second question to you is, it seems that the most organizations have decided to keep working remotely, or at least partially remotely. What are some of the challenges when using Scrum as a remote working teams? How do you see this situation?
That's a very interesting. It's a good question. I can remember years ago, one of the directors of Intel in a presentation said, "Yeah, this is a good question. You know what the difference is between a good question and an interesting question? A good question I can answer. An interesting question I have to get back to you. So this is a good question." And I think the biggest issue is communication. And here I think verbal communication is less of an issue. It is the lack of visibility of information radiators all of the time with dynamic status updates that I think causes problems in terms of facilitating good communication. And yes, you can argue, but we use Jira and we've got a Trello board and it's constantly being updated. But the problem with many of these electronic information radiators is that you can minimize the window. And one of the benefits of actually working in a physical location is the fact that even if you don't look at those information radiators, you observe them. You can just do a quick exercise. If you think about when last you drove to the shop in your car, how many stop streets were between your house and the shop? And many of you won't be able to answer that. And the next logical question then is to say, but did you stop at the stop streets? And you would most probably say yes, because you're listening to this conversation. So clearly you haven't been in an accident and landed up in hospital. And that's exactly how these information radiators work. You know, from a verbal communication perspective, there's also a little bit of drawbacks because yeah, it's great we have Teams and Zoom and all of these tools, but it's the communication by osmosis that doesn't happen if we work as remote teams. If we work in one location, you'll be surprised about how much we can learn from what's busy happening and how much better contributions we can make to other team members just by overhearing a conversation between two other colleagues. I don't think really there are any other drawbacks except for this issue of being in the midst of what's busy happening and the knowing with the information radiators, maybe except for a little bit of social cohesion. Do we feel part of the team? Do we work as a team? But I must admit, in the last nearly 2 years, we haven't experienced major issues around remote working teams. I think most organizations has actually found ways to deal with this quite effectively.
Okay, so if I wrap up what you said, you see that there are challenges when going to the only remote way of working due to the lack of contact with the other team members. So then the team members, they can feel that they are outside of the team somehow. Am I correct?
Yeah. So, what's interesting, there were quite a few surveys lately being done about going back to the workplace. And most people actually say they don't want to go back to the workplace on a permanent basis. But most people also said that they want to at least spend a day or two at the office. And I think people say that because we need company. We need conversation. We need to converse and be in a group to feel that we belong to the group.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I feel that the feeling and the need to be in groups exists since human beings, they are human beings, correct?
Yeah, we are social animals. We want to socially interact, and I think that's most probably not a direct issue around Scrum as such or Agile as such. It's just a basic human need. Yeah.
That's correct. Okay, so shall we move to the next question?
Yeah, sure.
So Johann, my next question to you is, DevOps is racing ahead in corporate adoption. How can Agile work with DevOps to deliver optimal value? That's a tricky question, I would say.
No, this is it's an excellent question. It is a brilliant question. So let me put it to you this way. If your DevOps initiative or work that you do in DevOps doesn't start with an agile development approach like Scrum, you've already failed to deliver proper DevOps. We need to understand also, and it's good that the new Scrum Guide has specifically highlighted this, the difference between sprints and increments. So you can have multiple increments in a sprint. And if you read what Scrum say about increments, it says that the moment you've created something of value and that's usable, that's got a definition of done, that's an increment, you need to make that available to the customer immediately. So theoretically, you can actually ship something on day 2 of your sprint because day 1 is sprint planning. Now, if you think about this, and you look at what a DevOps teams or an organization that use DevOps, what their Scrum board will look like. The columns that you'll find most probably will be not started, dev, DevOps, and done. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of steps within DevOps that will include things like unit testing and integration testing and regression testing and packaging and containerization and deployment testing and deploying and testing and live and rollback and feedback and all of that stuff. But the point is, though, that you can't say something in a sprint is done if you're in a DevOps environment, unless the CI/CD cycle is complete. So I don't see this as a challenge. I just see it as a natural outflow of making Agile work better. One of the big problems that organizations had before DevOps is that the dev team will work using Agile, and then they have to wait for the next release window. And that's ludicrous. I mean, because you've taken all of the agility that you've gained by using Scrum, and you've thrown it away by the fact that you can't make it available immediately. So to my mind, if you're an IT shop and you use Agile, you must use DevOps. If you're a IT shop that uses DevOps to deploy things, you must start your CI/CD cycle with an Agile approach like Scrum.
Okay, Johann, but I would like to add up like a new question from this question actually, but I think maybe one more simple question because I'm a simple soul talking to you over here, okay? And maybe a few of our audience, they are simple souls like me that basically I try to understand like how Agile can contribute to DevOps and vice versa. DevOps can contribute to Agile. So, for example, if I'm in an organization that I have like a team by developing software, or like not even software, let's say working based on Agile, but DevOps, as I understand, is more suitable for the IT field. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite correct, and that's why I said, if you're an IT organization that's using Agile or DevOps, you must use the other one. We can still use some DevOps principles delivering Agile projects, but obviously, I mean, DevOps is a mechanism to get software into the hands of users as quickly as possible.
Okay, understand that. But then, for example, if I'm from marketing or if I'm from finance, hardly I'll tap into DevOps, correct?
No, you won't use DevOps per se, but you can use the principles of DevOps. So, and it's this principle of the moment that you've got something that is usable, you make it available for people to use, and try and do so in a manner that's got as little as possible intervention and waiting involved. So if you were able to do that, you're sort of doing DevOps in HR, I suppose.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. But then for organizations that are, for example, already or currently using Agile, and then they decided to implement DevOps, are they gonna face like a too much challenge when trying to integrate both of the practices? How do you see this? Is this something like a feasible? No? Or for example, DevOps should be implemented first, then Agile? What comes first? It's like I feel that sometimes like a chicken egg story, but I'm not expert on this at all.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter what comes first. Logically, I would change. I would choose to start with Agile, because people think that DevOps is just automating everything, and it's not as simple as that. Because before you can start automating things within your IT context, you must make sure that the processes that you're going to use to do that automation, because that's what DevOps actually is it's just automating the process of taking software into the live environment. You must make sure that they work first before you start doing things. Otherwise, you're going to create chaos. So my choice is I will start with Agile, and then I'll go to a continual integration approach. So that means we write code, we promote the code, we to our main body of code. We'll do obviously we'll do things like unit testing and integration testing and package testing and regression testing and things like that. But then still have a manual way of actually rolling it out into the live environment. And I think it's good to start that way, because then at least that part of the the CI/CD cycle is bulletproof. And then you can go the next step and say, okay, so now let's start thinking about containerization and live automated rollout into the operation space. So that the moment a programmer has completed a bit of code for the day and they actually promote that code to their software repository or their development repository, basically by the next morning that code should be live within the operations environment. Now, people think that that is high risk to do that, but it's actually much less riskier to do that than to do releases. Because the problem with a release is you've got tons of things that were done that was grouped together, and then you take it into the live environment. And if it doesn't work then you don't have a clue what broke the live environment. Where if you actually use DevOps and you constantly deploy these small little bits, you immediately see if something is wrong, and it's very easy to roll it back. So the risk is really, really low if you use DevOps. And as I say, I don't think you should use DevOps if the front end of the DevOps CI/CD cycle is not agile. Excuse me.
Okay, I think it's clear, a little bit clear for me in my mind right now. Thank you very much for your answer, Johann. So,
sorry, I'm a techie at heart, and I started with in the IT industry, so I can wax on quite a lot about this issue of agile and DevOps.
That's fine. That's totally fine. So then, Johann, my next question to you is, what is the link between Scrum and CSI?
One of my other favorite questions, and it's really a good question. So Scrum is continual improvement. It's a mechanism to continually improve. The work that we do in Scrum is actually not project work, because the mere definition of a project is something that has got a start and an end. If we use Scrum, there is no end. What we're actually doing is we're just continually delivering value against requirements in a product backlog that continually evolves as we learn new things, so we can do it better, or because there's new requirements that are coming from our customer base. So if you think about it, you remember we said that Scrum is an empirical method. So that's the basis of Scrum. So what is empiricism? It's a continuous cycle of trying to understand, improving, testing, learning, improving, testing, learning, based on what we've learned in the previous cycle. So if you say to me, what's the difference between the two? I would say there's no difference. I would see Scrum actually as a CSI method, but CSI on steroids, because it's CSI that constantly works. Remember, one of the things that we say in Scrum is the moment that the one sprint is finished, the next sprint should start. That's continuous, isn't it?
It is. Definitely. Thank you very much for your answer, Johann. My
Pleasure.
next question to you is, in your mind, what are the top 3 challenges when adopting Scrum?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Most probably a few years ago, before COVID, I would most probably have said that it's one of the top issues is management's willingness to let people work differently. But I think COVID, to a large extent, has actually changed that. Now, I would say the biggest challenge are most probably incompatible performance measure criteria. People are measured against a certain set of criteria, and if you expect them to behave differently than the way that you've defined your measurement criteria in the new organization, they'll always revert back to the old way of doing things because that's how they measured. So I actually, and this is something that we see quite a lot in organizations, that see that HR and governance practices becomes huge stumbling blocks in the adoption of Agile and Scrum. Remember, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have performance metrics or controls. You just need different KPIs and different controls if you use Scrum. So you must make sure that the KPIs and the controls works with Scrum and reinforces the type of behavior that you expect when you move to working in a more agile way. You know, Peter Drucker used to say that what gets measured gets done, and I think that is true. This is really a huge issue. I really can't emphasize this enough. So you asked for 3. Let's say, secondly, this issue of indirect reporting lines and managerial control, and I think it sort of touches on what I've already mentioned in the previous bit of the answer. For many managers, it's a problem to relinquish full control over the people that work within their function to do work in cross-functional teams. What we've seen is it's less of an issue for younger managers in organizations. They get it, but the managers that are baby boomers and Gen Xers in the workplace find it really difficult to let go of the reins. And we need to make sure that this actually happens. And how do you change that behavior? Well, once again, if leadership supports the initiative to become more agile, what they need to do is they need to change the performance criteria of managers. What we suggest to customers is that close to half of the KPIs of managers within the organization should relate to how their team contributes to the success of the organization overall, or contributes to the success of other teams. So they need to be measured about how well their team plays in the sandpit. How well their team works in cross-functional teams. And the moment you start changing the performance criteria of managers, it makes it much easier to get this change in behavior. And I think the third big challenge that's a really big problem is the accountability of product owners and the level of seniority of most product owners in organizations are problematic. People don't understand really how important it is to have product owners that's truly the voice of the customer. If you want Scrum to work, you have to make sure that senior business leaders fulfills this role. And this is not the behavior that we see in many organizations. And what's actually quite interesting, we see organizations in your neck of the woods being very guilty of this, in the Netherlands and even in Germany. So remember, the product owner is an accountability that makes sure that strategy becomes a reality. And we need to keep on stressing that this role needs to be respected in the organization, and that they are the voice of the customer, and that their judgment must be respected for the accountability to work. What I keep on seeing is junior people with absolutely no authority, who are not respected within the organization that fulfills this accountability. And that is a major mistake. What we've even suggested to some of our customers is that budgets are moved away from operational silos and reallocated to products. So that means the product owner now owns the budget. And it actually makes sense, because it's products and services that creates value for customers. Shouldn't we then be able to say, it costs us so much to deliver this product and service, and this is what we got back? If you do that, you would see how quickly the PO role within a organization becomes or moves up to the right level. It becomes a role for senior business leaders, and how quickly the issue with resources and silos and focus and task switching and silo managers expecting people to do the normal work and then not being able to function properly within a sprint team just goes away. So I would say today, that's most probably, I think, the three biggest challenges in terms of the adoption of Scrum.
No, I liked very much of the three that you have listed. I think they are very much aligned with what I have seen also in the market, Johann. And especially the last one regarding to the product owner, because, well, the product owner thing, this is something that I face myself because, well, I'm a product owner for a few years already. But I have a question to you regarding to this. Don't you feel that the authority and the respect level that is required to be a product owner, this is something that is like a I'm trying to find the right word, but I would say that's like a concrete. It's not something that should be top down, but this is something that the product owner should develop at the organization, because at the end of the day, people need to the product owner to have the authority. She needs to be trusted, and then the teams and Scrum Masters and everyone else should trust on the product owner. How do you see this issue of trust? Do you feel that the lack of authority is going along with the lack of trust or lack of experience? How do you see this?
It's a really complex question to answer, but let me try. So, people only trust somebody once you've proven that you are trustworthy. And this issue of a lack of authority actually, in many instances, prevents people from being able to prove that they are trustworthy. I mean, it doesn't matter how hard some of these junior product owners is trying to make a difference within the organization. These managers in the highest echelons that just rides a roughshod over the principles of Scrum. This issue of autonomy and deciding what work you're going to do, and the team is accountable and whatever. And those are really, really important cultural issues to be changed. And we find that the easiest ways to change that is to make sure that product owners are senior within the organization. I think we need to actually start looking at how we design organizations. I'm not convinced that it's a good idea for us to continue along the way of our hierarchical view of working in organizations. Trust will certainly help, but all I can say is, just from my experience, is that it's really difficult for people to build trust if they're not given the opportunity to do so. And that's also unfair. It's unfair to expect somebody to do a job that you haven't enabled them to do. And that's one of the behaviors, in the first question that I highlighted, that it's organizations, the leadership of organizations, that desperately want to say, but we're agile, but they don't want to change the organization. And let's face it, Agile is transformational. If you think that you're gonna, you're gonna do a daily stand up, and just because you do that, you're Agile, you're making a hell of a mistake. This is really about a complete shift in the way that management and leadership in the organization think about how work is done and how value is created for our customers. So I truly believe that we need to solve this problem.
I couldn't agree more, Johann, because I truly believe, exactly as you said, that the design of the organization should be changed in order to embrace the agile mindset and the agility that is being required nowadays. Because as much as organizations keep the hierarchical levels as further as they are from being agile, because for me it doesn't make any sense. At least for me, I'm talking about myself, like my view of the market and the organizations. So yeah, fundamentally agree with you. Thanks for that explanation.
Okay, remember I said at the beginning, I'm not going to mince words.
That's correct. Thank you. So let's move to our next question. Otherwise, we are going to discuss about the organizational design and hierarchies and product owner for like the whole of this session and then the rest of the day. So my next question to you is: it seems that the scaling agile approach is getting popularity. What is your view on some of these methods, and why do you believe Scrum is still a better choice?
Okay. So there's one fundamental principle that you need in a scaling mechanism. It's a must. And I think to a large extent, or to some extent, it disqualifies a number of the mechanisms used to scale. If you want to scale in a way that you do a lot of pre-planning ahead of time, then you fundamentally breaking some of the rules of empiricism. And then I believe that you're making a mistake in the mechanism that you're using to scale. I will find it hard to reject any scaling mechanism, or accept rather any scaling mechanism that creates a water scrum fall scenario. And that's why most probably specifically I don't like heavy-handed approaches that's been called agile. And I know a lot of people are going to hate me for this. Something like SAFe, for instance. It's heavy on bureaucracy and it's light on empiricism. And I think empiricism is really important in terms of being able to work in an agile mechanism or in an agile way. And that's one of the reasons why I like Nexus as a scaling mechanism. Well, first of all, it was developed by the people who developed Scrum. So clearly they understand how the two works together. Call it Scrum on steroids if you want to. It focuses on what is done this iteration and not 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 iterations ahead, because in any case, it's stupid if you think you know what's going to happen in 10 iterations from now. The only drawback that I see with Nexus is that Nexus is great in terms of scaling work complexity when using Scrum. But it's not so great to scale the complexity of a product backlog. And that's one of the other reasons why I just cannot emphasize enough the importance of a product owner. Remember, for every Nexus, you've got one product owner. The rule is one product owner, yeah? And that applies obviously to Nexus also. So there are lots of scaling mechanisms. I haven't investigated all of them, but I have looked at quite a number of them, including things like LESS and scaled Scrum, and of all of the approaches that I've seen, Lexis is my preferred method, and that's one of the reasons why it was included in the official workbook also. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yes, it does. It does. And again, I agree with you. Like I have my own personal preferences regarding to this, that it's kind of aligned with you, but I'm from the side that I believe that the basics fits all. And then
Yeah.
like a one product backlog, one product owner. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less than this.
And the other thing is, you do planning for your current your current sprint. Don't do it ahead of time. Yeah. So what Nexus, for instance, do is it will identify dependencies and make note of those dependencies so that you don't forget about it when you get to the next planning cycle. But Nexus never tries to plan ahead, because the moment you start planning ahead, it means that none of your planning includes the lessons that you've learned in this cycle. And that's what empiricism is about. I mean, you do work, and by doing work, you understand what you're doing better, and you learn lessons, and you become better. And clearly, you want to use that being better and knowing more in your next planning cycle. If you plan ahead, all of that learning just goes out the window.
Okay, Johan. And just a disclaimer for our audience, I didn't agree with Johan, his answers at all from this webinar. I'm agreeing with him, in most of his answers, but I didn't agree with him in advance at all this. So it's super nice, to see that we are in completely different countries and different completely experiences, but we are very much aligned, Johan. Thanks for that.
But Adam, let's face it. I mean, what we do is based on Scrum.
Yeah.
If you understand Scrum, you believe certain things and you'll make certain choices, because that is what Scrum is.
That's very true. That's very true. So let's move to our next question. For many organizations, Agile revolves around tools. What are some of the challenges of using a tool-based approach? And if you use one, what should you look out for?
Oh man. Now this is one of my pet hates. So let's start with not talking about tools. So first of all, Agile is a mindset. It's about changing the way that you manage an organization and do work. Using tools and thinking that that will make you agile is just plain dumb. Virtually every single Scrum implementation that I've seen that's a mess is because people started with tools. Okay, so never ever start with a tool. Tools don't solve problems. People do. Yeah, so understand what it is that you're trying to do. Get your process right first, then start looking about the tool that will work the best for your context. So we really need to emphasize the role of leadership as a change leadership within the organization, and realize that adopting Agile is actually a organizational transformation, because it means that over time, virtually everything that you do in the organization is going to be different. So, yeah, tools, yes, there are tons of great tools out there, but they're just tools. What do they say? A good tool doesn't make a good artisan. And a good artisan can do good work with very limited tools. So forget about the tools. Understand, get the fundamentals right. Think about what it means for your organization, and then go and choose a tool. There's tons of them out there. Lots of them are good. There's some of them that's less good, but there's nothing wrong with using just a Trello board, for instance, or If you want to use something complex like Jira, go for it. Yeah. Lots of my customers started using the Microsoft DevOps platform as their preferred way of doing Agile. It works. If it works for you, go for it. Yeah. What I like though about your approach, the approach that Exit is taking, is that there's the Agile Business Professional certification. Because that's really where it needs to start. It needs to start with the leadership and the management within the organization having an agile mindset. And personally, I think every manager in an organization that aspires to become agile needs to go and do that course and write that exam. So no, I'm not going to give you a list of tools.
Thank you very much for not giving me a list of tools into our audience as well, because I feel that this is like a lessons learned that we had since the, let's go back maybe 20 years ago, IT service management. What comes first, process or tools? Vendors
Process,
would say
always.
tools, but then we
No.
would say no, the processes comes first, because otherwise how the tools can be configured or how they would operate, and then doesn't make any sense. Correct?
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. So yeah, start with understanding, get the fundamentals right. Yeah. And you'll look at it, a ton of tools, and some organizations will choose A, and some will choose B, and some will choose C, just because it fits better within their context. Yeah. And some would choose tools that's not made as an agile tool as such. Yeah, it's like the guys using the Microsoft DevOps product, but it works for them. Yeah. So more power to them. And one of actually my biggest agile customers are doing exactly that.
Great, great. Thank you very much, Johan. So now we are going to approach the last question of this session. And then I would like to remind you, the audience, that you can drop your question by using the questions or the chat tab, because after the question number 8, I'm gonna take a look in the questions from you. So if you would like to address any question to Johann Botha, please, this is your chance before we wrap up the session, okay? So Johan, the last question that I'm gonna address officially over here for you before the audience and the wrap up of the session. Which of the accountabilities in Scrum is the least understood and underestimated when it gets to successful adoption?
You already know what my answer is going to be there.
Go
So
on.
I think by now everybody knows and understands that, yeah, it would be the product owner. The product owner is the accountability that will either make Scrum work or fail in your organization. And I'm specifically saying there's no proxy product owners. If you're not a party that is respected by the customer to be their voice, you should not be the product owner. In fact, I think this is maybe a radical idea. Maybe most middle managers in organizations in the future, their role should shift from functional management to a product owner role. Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting experiment. I mean, I haven't done it. We haven't tried it anyway, but it sounds like a good idea to me. And I know this might upset some people, but think about it. The role of management is to make sure that things get done in the right way. And most people in the workplace today are quite capable of managing themselves. They don't need supervision. So how do we then make sure that work is done in the right way? It's by understanding what needs to be done first, reordering your product backlog, influencing the team to work on the right things, constantly have connection and interaction with other teams. Yeah, communicate with your customers. That sounds like a really, really good role for me, for a middle manager to have in a organization of the future. Maybe other middle management roles would also be necessary. Maybe, if we think about roles, about coordination between different products, because remember, a product owner focuses on only one product. So there will definitely be roles like that, and I think we should explore that also. And maybe, that's roles like business architecture and governance, that can evolve into roles like that. What is clear, though, is that communication, coordination, cross-functional thinking, coaching will become critical management skills in future. So I've already now also mentioned some of the functions of a good Scrum Master also. Yeah. So if you think about what a product owner and a Scrum Master is actually doing, those are the core future management skills that will set you apart. Maybe that, and including this issue of being able to think outside of the box and solve problems. It's evident that organizations in future is going to become flatter, and that we need to make work for people in organizations more meaningful, and make it easier for people to be able to measure their own contribution towards the success of the organization. And that's exactly what happens if you work as a developer in a Scrum team. All routine and non-thinking work should be automated. In any case, machines can do it better than we can do it. They make less mistakes. And quite frankly, I think it's immoral to expect human beings to do work that's not challenging. We can find better things for humans to do. And my first point of call would be go and solve problems, pay down technical debt, continue to improve your organization, make your products and services better and more meaningful to your customers. And every single thing that I've actually just said in the last 2 or 3 paragraphs or sentences is all what we're doing with the 3 fundamental accountabilities in Agile Scrum. I think I veered off the question a little bit, but yeah, that's what I want to say.
No, that's very great, Johann. Thank you very much for your answer. And now, unfortunately, due to the lack of time, I will take all of your questions offline, and then I'll guarantee that we're going to reply to each of the questions, and then we're going to address to you. So before we wrap up the session, I would like to briefly explain to you the Xing Agile Scrum certification for the candidates and for the organizations that are looking up for how to develop the skills of the workforce, or if you are a professional who would like to be certified and pursue a career in Agile and Scrum. So Xing offers a whole of certifications. We start from the foundation level that will provide the basic knowledge for you, and then if you'd like to become a product owner or an Agile Scrum Master, then of course we offer the Agile Scrum Master and Product Owner certification. However, if you are from the business side, or if you are a line manager or a business manager and would like to incorporate the agility into your processes, so then we have the Xing Agile Business Professional. And for those that are in a highest level of the career that would like to coach organizations to embrace the agile transformation and mindset, so then we have the agile coach. However, heads up, you need to be already very much experienced in the agile methodologies and mindset to reach out to this level of certification, since this is the highest agile coach certification level of the market. And also the mid-levels of the certifications from Exing, Business Professional, Scrum Master, and Product Owner, the future practical assignments, whereby you need to take over the role along the training, and then in the exams they are based on real scenarios. So all your knowledge and competencies they're going to be is tested and also is stressed. So they are not likely a foundation level. They are quite advanced level and high level, all of these certifications, aside from foundation. So if you are interested in to know more, please access exing.com and then go to the certifications Agile, and over there you're going to find everything you need to know regarding to our exams and also our training providers that are accredited by offering these certifications and trainings. And also, I'd like to drag your attention to the Exing handbook for Scrum Masters and Product Owners that was written by Johann Botha, our lovely Johann. He wrote this masterpiece that is available for download free of charge. And then this masterpiece was downloaded for more than thousands and thousands of candidates from different parts of the world. Basically, the whole world already downloaded this masterpiece that was written by Johann. So if you'd like to read or understand more about what it is like to be a Scrum Master, a Product Owner, or to prepare for your examination, please download this handbook free of charge via exing.com, certifications, Agile Scrum, and over there you can find the download link. And before we go, Johann, I would like to give the floor again to you.
Thank you, Adam, for allowing me to do a quick promo here. We were a traditional organization doing classroom-based training, but we've in the last 2 years have changed the way that we do things completely. And if any of you are interested in exploring our mentorship and consultative learning programs, which can either be done on a one-on-one basis or in small groups, and we can do it remotely, we can do it on site, and we do work all over the world. Please be in touch. I would be glad to assist. Just maybe as an add-on to this, there's a bunch of other things that we also do, and that's most of the things that we do are actually excellent programs. That's sort of aligned with Agile Scrum. So that includes Lean, DevOps, Verisym, and for the Verisym Professional, the handbook that's prescribed for that certification, I was one of the co-authors also, and then IT Service Management. This is most probably the things that we do most from a learning and coaching perspective. Also, we've got slightly different approaches in terms of the way that we do things based on who you are, what the audience is, and we do work with executives because we believe it's really, really important for executives and senior and middle management to understand the true commitment that they need to make and their important role to getting organizations to become really agile. If any of this is of interest, you're most welcome to contact us, and we can have a chat about that. The presentation is also available for download, and you'll see at the end of the presentation there's a few YouTube videos of some of the people that we've worked with in the past, and so if you needed to feel a little bit more comfortable with working with somebody on the other side of the world, go and listen to what they have to say. I just want to get back to the previous slide and so just bear in mind the business professional, the Scrum Master and the Product Owner certifications are all advanced level certifications. That being said, though, is although it's a good idea to do foundation, if you already have got a lot of Scrum background and knowledge, it is possible to do those certifications without doing foundation. It's maybe not the best idea, but it is possible. And I think that's one of the things that makes Exing different to many of the other exam institutions is because they realize that sometimes you're a senior person and you don't want to sit and do a foundation course. And then the last thing is the Agile Coach program is not a course. It's actually, you get evaluated based on past work and projects by very experienced Agile coaches to see if you make the grade. So it's really a prestige certification, and if you see your role long term as a professional in this space, I would encourage you, once you've got a little bit of practical experience, to consider doing that program. And I think, except for saying thank you very much to Adama and to Ixon for making giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much for listening. If there are any other questions, you're most welcome to still send them in. We will answer them. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Johann, for your participation over here, and then to answer all of the questions and then to discuss with us. It's always great to have you on board with us. So thank you very much. And also on behalf of Axiom, I'd like to say thank you to our audience. This session was recorded, so you are going to receive the recordings, and also, as Johann said, you are going to receive also the PDF of this presentation. And over there, don't miss out the testimonials from the Get It Right